You want to know the exact moment a whole room full of loud, sweating, sure of themselves men went dead silent. I was there. I saw it happen with my own eyes. And I'll be honest with you, there are nights, years later, when I still lie awake and run it back, frame by frame, like an old film I can't stop projecting on the ceiling. But let me back up. Stories like this only work if you understand the room first. The people, the smell of the place, the way nobody walking in that morning had any idea what they were about to witness. It was a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because Tuesday was the day everybody dreaded. We called it the long block, the conditioning day. 2 hours of the program director's idea of a good time, which was everybody else's idea of a slow death by burpee. People would actually text each other Monday night, "You going tomorrow?" Like they were checking whether anyone else was brave enough to show. Half the time the answer was, I guess. We trained out of an old recreation center on the edge of town. The county had owned it for decades, used to run swim lessons and bingo nights out of it. And then somewhere along the line, they'd half converted the big back hall into a fitness space for the local reserve unit and anybody from the community who wanted to train alongside them. So it was this strange in-between place. Concrete floors that had been painted gray and then scuffed back down to bare in the high-traffic spots. Exposed pipes running across the ceiling. Tall windows up near the roofline, the kind that let in light but you could never reach to open. One enormous industrial fan in the far corner that rattled like it had a screw loose somewhere deep in its chest. A sound that became the heartbeat of every session, TK, 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 until you stopped hearing it entirely. The whole place smelled like rubber mats and old sweat in somebody's cheap menthol muscle rub, the kind that comes in a tub the size of a paint can. To this day, if I catch that smell anywhere, a locker room, a pharmacy aisle, I'm right back in that hall. That particular Tuesday it was raining. Not hard, not a storm, just that steady, patient gray drizzle that some mornings settle in and decide to stay all day. The kind of rain that doesn't soak you so much as it finds the gap between your collar and your neck and drips one cold line straight down your spine. People came in shaking water off their shoulders, stamping their feet on the rubber mat by the door, complaining about the parking lot and the puddles and how the weather guy had promised it'd clear by 9. I want to be straight with you about who I was in that room, because it matters. I was nobody special there. I really mean that. I wasn't reserve. I wasn't an athlete. I was a 46-year-old man whose doctor had looked at me over his glasses one afternoon and said, in that flat way doctors do, that if I didn't start moving my body on purpose, my knees were going to file for divorce and take my back with them. So I'd signed up for the community side of the program out of pure fear. 3 months in, I was still the guy on the edge of the room, half a beat behind every count, doing the modified version of everything, mostly watching the real participants and trying not to be in the way. And that's probably exactly why I noticed her before anyone else did. When you're the one standing at the side, you see things the people in the middle of it miss. She came in late. Not by a lot, maybe 2 minutes after the hour, but understand, in that room, 2 minutes late was practically a felony. The director ran on time the way some people run on religion. She walked in out of the rain, and the first thing I clocked was that she didn't move like a late person. There was no rushing, no apologetic little jog, no that pained face people make when they know everyone's watching them slink in. She just came through the door at her own pace, calm as a Sunday morning, like the clock worked for her and not the other way around. She was older than most of the crowd. Early 40s, I'd have guessed, though something about her made age hard to pin down. She had the kind of face that had clearly seen a few things. Her hair was pulled back tight and low, the sort of severe, no-nonsense type that says, I do not have 1 single second to spend on my hair being a problem today. Her posture was straight without being stiff. She found a spot near the back wall like she'd scouted it before, set down a dented metal water bottle and stood there waiting, hands loose at her sides, eyes forward, patient. and she was wearing a jacket. That's the detail that snagged me. A jacket. A heavy one. Gray, slightly faded, zipped all the way up to the throat. The kind of coat you'd reach for on a genuinely cold day, not the 70-something stuffy warmth of a gym where the old heater was already losing a slow war against that rattling fan. I looked around. Nobody else was wearing one. Everybody had stripped down already, shorts, tees, tanks, the usual. People were fanning themselves with their hands. And there in the back stood this woman, zipped to her chin like she was waiting for a bus in February. I didn't think much of it, honestly. I figured she was cold-natured. Some people are. I filed it away and went back to dreading the long block. Then Briggs noticed her. I need to tell you about Briggs because the whole thing turns on him, and if you don't understand Briggs, you'll think this is just a story about a mean man getting embarrassed. It's not. It's more than that. It took me a long time to understand that it was more than that. Briggs ran the conditioning block. He wasn't the head of the whole program. That was a quiet, gray-haired man named Dunmore, who mostly stayed in the little office by the entrance doing paperwork, and only came out when something needed a calm, final word. But Dunmore handed the floor to Briggs for the conditioning days, and on the floor, Briggs was king. He was mid-30s, built like a refrigerator somebody had taught to walk thick through the chest and shoulders, neck wider than his jaw, the kind of muscle that's clearly been earned but is also clearly the centerpiece of the man's entire personality. He kept his hair buzzed close. He wore the same brand of compression shirt every single day in a rotation of colors. And he had this one signature move. He'd clap his hands together, one time hard and sharp, when he wanted the room's attention. Crack. It bounced off the concrete like a gunshot. He clearly thought it made him look like the drill instructors in the movies he'd obviously watched too many of. The thing about Briggs, and I'll keep saying this because it's important, he wasn't evil. Deep down, he wasn't even really a bully, not in the way that word usually means. But that morning, on that Tuesday in front of that crowd, he was precisely, the kind of man you'd love to see knock down a peg. And the universe, it turned out, had been saving up. He clapped crack. The room flinched and assembled. "All right," he barked. "Let's move on the line. We're not here to socialize." Everybody shuffled into rough rows facing him. The woman in the gray jacket moved with the rest, slid into a spot, settled in, hands loose, eyes forward, that same unbothered calm. Briggs liked to walk the line before he started. It was part of the show. He'd pace down the rows with his hands clasped behind his back, looking people up and down like a general inspecting troops, occasionally stopping to make some comment that was supposed to be motivating and usually just made the person flush. People dreaded the walk almost more than the workout. He came down the line, stopped in front of her. His eyes went to the jacket. You could see the gears turn. "Jacket," he said. She met his eyes. "Excuse me." "The jacket off. We don't train in winter coats around here." "I'd rather keep it on if that's all right." The room did something I can only describe as collectively holding its breath. You could feel it. A little ripple of oh, because nobody, and I mean nobody, told Briggs they'd rather do anything. You did what Briggs said, or you got the walk-and-talk treatment. He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just been handed exactly the thing he was hopping for. "You'd rather keep it on," he repeated, slow, savoring it. "Yes. It's about 75 degrees in here." He spread his arms a little, gesturing at the room, inviting everyone to share the joke with him. "You training for an expedition, climbing something later." A couple of the younger guys near the front grinned. One actually chuckled. She didn't bite, didn't flinch. "I've got a medical situation," she said, plain, level. "I can do the work, I just prefer to keep my jacket on while I do it." And there it was, the word medical, the excuse. I watched Briggs's whole face light up like a kid who just walked into the kitchen and found the cookie jar unguarded on the counter. This was his territory. This was the thing he'd built his entire persona around. A medical situation, he repeated, and he said it slow, rolling it around in his mouth, tasting every syllable for the benefit of the crowd. Of course you do. Now, I need you to really feel the room, because the room is the whole thing. There were maybe 25 of us that Tuesday. Mostly younger, reserved guys in their 20s, a few community members like me, a handful of women. And here's the truth about a room like that. When somebody starts going after one person, you can feel which way the whole thing is going to tip almost instantly. People want to be on the safe side of the joke. Nobody wants to risk becoming the next target, so they laugh. Not because it's funny, because laughing puts them on the right team. So when Briggs said it like that, of course you do, 3 or 4 people laughed. Not cruel laughs exactly. Nervous ones. The kind of laugh that's really just a hand shooting up to say I'm with him, don't look at me. The woman in the gray jacket heard it. I watched her hear it. Her jaw tightened just the smallest fraction. But she didn't turn her head, didn't look around to find who'd laughed. She kept her eyes forward and her chin level. Briggs was rolling now. He was in his element. He stepped back and started to walk a slow, theatrical circle around her, hands clasped behind his back, talking not really to her but to everybody. You know how many medical situations I hear about in a single week, he said. Bad knee, bad back, bad shoulder, migraines, tweaked something on the stairs. Everybody's carrying around some reason they can't go full effort today. Everybody's got a story. He completed his circle and stopped in front of her again. And you want to know what I've figured out after years of this? The people with all the reasons, the ones with a fresh excuse every week, they are never, not once, the same people who actually show up when it counts. Funny how that works. She said nothing. So here's how this is going to go. He clapped again, crack, and turned to address the rows. Everybody's gonna train, full block, no shortcuts. And you? He swung back around and pointed one thick finger at her chest. You can keep your special jacket and you can hold on to your special situation and you can stand right there in the back and watch the rest of us work. Because I will tell you something I tell everybody. I do not carry passengers. Passenger. That was the word that did it for me. That was the one that turned my stomach. I watched her face when he said it. And here's the part I've never been able to shake. She didn't get angry. That's the thing that haunts me. If somebody had spoken to me like that in front of 24 people, I'd have gone red, said something stupid, maybe walked out. Most people would, but she just looked at him, steady, almost, and I know how strange this sounds, almost sad. Like she'd met this exact man 100 times before, in 100 different rooms, wearing 100 different shirts, and she was just tired. Tired of how completely predictable he was. Tired of having to do this again. I can do the work, she said, quiet, even, no heat in it at all. Yeah, Briggs threw his arms wide, playing to the back rows. Then prove it. Drop and give me 20, right here, right now, in front of God and everybody, with the jacket on since it's such a big deal to you. And that's when the room changed. Because the laughing had stopped. Even the guys who'd chuckled before were quiet now. And I think it's because we'd all just felt the same thing at the same time, that invisible line between teasing somebody and cornering them. And we just watched Briggs walk straight across it without even slowing down. The fan rattled in the corner. TK, 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 TK. The rain tapped the high windows, and everybody waited to see what she'd do. She didn't drop and give him 20. She just stood there for a long, long second, letting his demand hang in the air. And then she said something nobody in that room saw coming. How many can you do? Briggs blinked, the momentum stuttered. What? Push-ups, you, how many can you do? She tilted her head a fraction. You're standing here asking me to prove myself to the room. Fair enough. So I'm asking what the standard is. What's a good number in your professional opinion? A couple of people made that low ooh sound, the one a crowd makes when somebody lands a clean shot. It was soft, but Briggs heard it. He recovered fast, though. I'll give him that. He was always quick to recover. "I can do 50, he said, lifting his chin, without breaking a sweat. "Okay," she nodded, calm as anything. 50. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you can do 50 push-ups." "I'm telling you I'll match whatever you do. You set the number, so you go first." And that, right there, was the moment I realized this woman was operating on a completely different level than Briggs understood. Because look what she'd just done. She'd flipped the whole thing without raising her voice a single decibel. Now he had to go first. Now if he backed out, he was the one making excuses in front of the room. She'd taken his own favorite weapon and turned the handle around. Briggs felt it. You could see him feel it. He glanced around the rows, and there it was, the thing he was so good at sensing, the way the room's attention had quietly slid off her and onto him. They were watching him now, waiting to see if he'd put up or shut up. So he did the only thing a man like Briggs can do in that spot. He doubled down. "Fine," he said, and dropped to the mat. "Count 'em out." And credit where it's due, he banged out 50. He was strong. There was no faking it. He went fast off the top, chest to the floor, full lockout, the younger guys actually starting to count out loud around rep 20, the whole room getting into it. He slowed in the 40s. His arms started to shake on the last 5. The final 3 were ugly, grinding, his face going purple with effort. But he got there. 50. He pushed up to his feet, breathing hard, sweat already darkening the front of that compression shirt, and he turned and jabbed his finger at her. "Your turn," he panted, "with the jacket." The whole room turned with him, back to her. And here's where it gets strange. Here's the part I've never told the right way, no matter how many times I've tried. She didn't get down on the floor, not yet. Instead, she reached up slowly, deliberately, taking her time, and put her right hand on the zipper at her throat. And she looked Briggs dead in the eye while she did it. "You really want me to take this off?" she said. It wasn't a question, it was almost a warning. "I want you to do the work," he said, but something had shifted in his voice. A hairline crack of hesitation. Some animal part of him, the part underneath all the noise and the clapping, had started to sense that he was standing at the edge of something he did not understand and could not control. She held his eyes a beat longer. Then she pulled the zipper down. And the room went silent. I have tried, more times than I can count, to find the right words for what we saw in that moment. I never quite get it. Every time I describe it, the words come out smaller than the thing actually was, like trying to carry an ocean home in a paper cup. Her left arm, from a few inches below the shoulder, was gone. In its place was a prosthetic, not one of the discreet kind, the lifelike ones they make to blend in, to spare other people the discomfort of having to notice. No, this was the other kind. All exposed carbon fiber and dull metal and visible joints, a piece of serious engineering that made no apology and pretended to be nothing other than what it was. A tool, built for work, by someone who had decided long ago to stop hiding it. And you could tell just from looking that it had done a lot of work. The finish was scuffed and worn at the points of use. This was not a display piece. This was a part of her life. But that, and I need you to understand this, that was not the part that stopped everyone's breath. It was the rest of it. Down her right arm, across the shoulder, spreading up from beneath the collar of the shirt she wore under the jacket, climbing the side of her neck and reaching toward her collarbone was scarring. Burned scarring. The deep kind. The kind that ripples and shines and pulls the skin into ridges and valleys it was never designed to make. Old scars long healed, the angry red long since faded to that pale, taut, permanent quiet that burns leave behind after years. But the kind of marks that tell you. Even if you've never seen anything like it in your life, even if you know nothing about anything, that this person had once been somewhere very, very bad. And that whatever happened there, they did not walk away from it unchanged. They carried it out on their skin. And there I only caught it because she was still holding the jacket open, the lining facing partly toward us, pinned to the inside of that gray jacket, was a small, neat row of ribbons. Military ribbons. I didn't know what most of them meant. I'm a civilian, that whole language was foreign to me. But I knew enough to recognize one of them, sitting there among the rest. A purple one. Even I knew what the purple one meant. She hadn't been wearing the jacket because she was cold. She'd been wearing it so that nobody would ask. Nobody laughed now. Nobody made a sound. The big fan kept rattling away in its corner, oblivious, tk, and the rain kept tapping its patient rhythm on the high windows. Somewhere off to my right, a young guy whispered, "Oh my God," barely a breath, like the words had slipped out before he could catch them. Briggs's face had drained to a color I still don't have a proper name for. Not red, the opposite of red, a sort of waxy, bloodless white. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and nothing came out, not one word. The loudest man in the building had been switched off at the source. The woman, and I should give you her name now, because I learned it later and it deserves to be in this story properly. Captain Renata Hollies. Though that Tuesday morning to all of us, she was still just the woman in the gray jacket. She let the silence sit there, just for a moment. And here's the thing you have to understand about her, the thing that separated her from every other person who's ever been wronged in front of a crowd. She wasn't enjoying it. There was no triumph on her face, no gotcha, no little smile of revenge. If anything, what was on her face was something almost gentle, almost tired, like she'd hoped, right up until the last second, that she wouldn't have to do this, that he'd back down and let her be. And he hadn't, so here they were. Then, without a word, she got down on the floor, with one arm and a piece of carbon fiber, and she started doing push-ups. The prosthetic planted flat on the mat, her right arm the scarred one beside it, and she lowered herself down, chest nearly to the floor, and pushed back up, slow, controlled, no flailing, no kipping, no cheating the range. Down, up, and the whole room started counting in their heads without a single person saying a number out loud. 10, 15, 20. Her breathing got heavier. You could see the scarred skin across her shoulder shift and pull with each repetition, but the rhythm never broke. Down, up. 30. The prosthetic arm had started to make a faint sound under the load, a low creak of stressed material at the bottom of each rep. Nobody breathed. 40. By 40, her right arm was visibly trembling, and sweat had darkened the back of her shirt, and that prosthetic was creaking on every single descent, and there was not one human being in that entire hall breathing in a normal pattern. 45. 48. 49. She lowered down one final time, slow, the arm shaking like it might quit, and pushed up to 50. And then she held it there, at the top, locked out, for one full second, two, just long enough to make the point land in every skull in the room. Then she sat back on her heels, and the room exploded. Not with laughter, with the other thing, the opposite thing. People clapping, real clapping, the loud cracking kind, somebody letting out a whoop, two of the younger reserve guys actually up on their feet. The sound just burst out of everyone at once, like a pressure valve that had been screwed down too tight for too long and finally let go. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge it at all, really. She just stood up, reached down, picked her jacket up off the mat where she'd let it fall, and put it back on. Slow, deliberate. Pulled the zipper all the way back up to her chin, like she was closing a door on a room she didn't care to leave open to the public. Here's where the story goes somewhere most people don't expect, because I've told this around a few campfires and a few kitchen tables over the years, and right about here, everyone assumes they know the ending. They assume Briggs slinks off in shame, humiliated, and we never see him again. And we all get to feel that clean little hit of satisfaction that comes from watching a jerk get what's coming to him. That is not what happened. When the noise finally died down, and it took a while, Briggs was still standing in the same spot, and he had the look of a man who just felt the floor open up beneath everything he thought he knew about himself. Because here's the thing about Briggs. He had built his entire identity, his whole way of moving through the world on a single idea. The idea that he could read people, that he could look at someone across a room and instantly know who had it and who didn't. That weakness had a look, and strength had a look, and he, Briggs, was a master at telling them apart at a glance. And he had just been catastrophically, publicly, unmistakably wrong, in front of 25 people, about the single strongest person any of us had ever seen. A weaker man, and isn't it funny, the way that word kept flipping around that morning, a weaker man would have gotten angry, would have scrambled immediately for a way to make it her fault. Well, you should have just said something. Why'd you let me go on like that? You set me up. I've watched plenty of men do exactly that when they get caught out. Turn the shame into blame faster than you can blink because the shame is unbearable and the blame is easy. Briggs didn't do that. He walked over to her, the entire room watching, dead quiet again. He stopped a few feet away, and for a moment he just stood there, and his jaw was working but no sound was coming, and I genuinely thought he might not be able to get it out at all. Then he did. I owe you an apology. The room held still, a completely different kind of stillness than before. He swallowed hard. His eyes dropped to the floor, then climbed back up and made themselves meet hers, which I think cost him more than the 50 push-ups had cost him. I made an assumption about you, out loud in front of all these people, and I was wrong. I was real wrong. He took a breath that shuddered on the way in. I'm sorry, I mean that. I'm not just saying it because of what you showed us. I'm saying it because it was a rotten thing to do to a person, and I'd have been wrong to do it even if you were exactly who I decided you were. That last part surprised me. There was more self-awareness in it than I'd have credited him with. Captain Hollis looked at him for a long moment. Read him, the way he'd always claimed he could read others, and whatever she saw, it seemed to settle something. Then she did the thing I least expected. Where'd you serve? She asked. Briggs blinked. Ma'am. You move like somebody who served. She nodded at him at all of it. The clap, the lineup, the whole way you run this room, that's not gym instructor stuff. That's a man who learned it somewhere. So, where were you? There was no meanness in the question. None at all. It was almost kind, which, after everything, made it harder for him to answer than an insult would have been. His big shoulders came down an inch. The performance drained out of him all at once, and what was left underneath looked younger and a lot more tired. I didn't, ma'am, he said quietly. That's the whole thing, isn't it? He let out a breath through his nose. I tried 3 times, couldn't get past the medical screening. Heart thing born with it, nothing they can fix, nothing that even bothers me day to day, but it's enough that they won't take you. 3 times they turned me around at the door. He shook his head slowly, eyes somewhere far off. So I run this. I run the block. And I guess somewhere along the line, without ever deciding to, I started acting like the thing they never let me be. Played the part so long I forgot I was playing it. And there it was. The whole sad little engine of the man, laid bare on the concrete floor for everyone to see. All that noise, all that clapping and barking and walking the line. It had never been about being strong. It had been about hiding a wound that nobody could see, a medical situation, you might even call it, behind the loudest possible version of strength he could build. Captain Hollis took that in. She didn't pounce on it. Didn't say anything cruel, though she'd have had every right in the world. If anything, when she looked at him now, she looked at him gentler than before. Like she finally understood him, and the understanding had softened her toward him rather than the other way around. You ever stop to think, she said, about all those people who come through that door with their bad knees and their tweaked backs and their migraines and their reasons, the ones you've been writing off as passengers all this time? She nodded toward the rows of us, all of us still rooted in place. Maybe some of them are showing more guts than you've ever given them an ounce of credit for, showing up scared, showing up hurting. Showing up dead certain they're going to be the worst one in the room and getting in their car and driving over here anyway. She paused. That takes something real. You, of all people, ought to know exactly what it takes. You've been driving over here and putting on the show every single day, haven't you? Same thing, just a different costume." Briggs didn't say anything. He couldn't. But something in his face came apart and reassembled, like a fist that had been clenched so long it had forgotten it was a fist, slowly, finally opening. She could have left it there. Honestly, that would have been more than enough. The push-ups, the apology, the quiet truth she'd pulled out of him, any one of those alone would have made the morning something none of us forgot. She could have zipped her jacket the rest of the way, gone to the back wall, and finished the session, and we'd all have driven home shaken and changed. But she didn't leave it there. She turned around to the rest of us, the whole room. "Can I say something?" she asked. It wasn't aimed at Briggs anymore. It was aimed at all 25 of us standing there in our rows like kids who'd forgotten how to move. Nobody objected. You couldn't have stopped her with a wall. "I lost the arm 11 years ago," she said, plain, matter of fact, the way you tell someone what road to take to get to the highway. It was a device in the road. I was in the vehicle. I was, believe it or not, the lucky one that day. 2 people I cared about, 2 people I'd have traded places within a heartbeat, they weren't. She let that sit in the air, didn't rush past it. I spent the next year learning how to do every ordinary thing in the world all over again. How to button a shirt with one hand, how to open a jar, how to tie a shoe, and this is going to sound stupid, how to clap. She glanced just for a second at Briggs, at his hands, at the clap that had ruled this room. "Because you need 2 hands to clap," she said, and for a long stretch in there I'd quietly decided I was just never going to do it again, never going to applaud anything, never going to be at the kind of party or the kind of moment where people clap. I'd written it off. Easier to give the thing up than to stand there in a crowd being the only one who couldn't. The fan rattled, the rain tapped, nobody so much as shifted their weight. "And you want to know the hardest part of all of it," she went on. "It wasn't the pain. Pain you can get on top of eventually. It wasn't even losing the people, though God knows that's a wound that never really closes. You just build the rest of your life around the shape of it. No, the hardest part, the part that nearly finished me when nothing else could, was the look." She turned her head slowly, taking in the whole room, every face. "You all know the look. Don't pretend you don't. It's the look people give you the second they decide you can't do something. Sometimes it's pity, which is bad enough. But the worst version, the one that really takes the legs out from under you, is the certainty. That little flat certainty in somebody's eyes that you are less now. That whatever you used to be, you've been demoted. That they get to set your limit for you, and the limit is low, and there's no point in you even trying because they've already done the math." She looked at Briggs when she said that part. And this is the thing I keep coming back to, not to punish him with it, to explain, to let him understand exactly what his little speech had landed on, what he'd carelessly poured salt into without ever knowing the wound was there. "That," she said, "is why I wear the jacket, and I want to be clear because people always get this part wrong. I do not wear it because I'm ashamed. I'm not ashamed of 1 inch of this." She lifted the prosthetic just slightly and touched the scarred skin at her shoulder with her right hand, lightly, almost fondly, the way you might touch an old scar you've made your peace with. "I earned every bit of it. I'd wear it on the outside of everything if the world were a different place." She let the prosthetic drop back to her side. "I wear the jacket because I'm tired. That's the whole unglamorous truth of it. I'm tired of the look. I'm tired of the questions. I'm tired of watching the exact same movie play out on a stranger's face, the surprise, then the pity, then the "oh, you poor thing, how do you even manage?" I'm tired of being somebody's daily reminder to be grateful for their own 2 arms. I just want to walk into a room, do my work, and walk back out like every other person in the building. That's it. That's the entire secret. There's no inspiration speech here. I'm not a hero standing in front of you. I'm just a woman who would very much like to do her push-ups in peace and go home." Somebody near the front let out a short laugh at that. A real one, warm. The kind that breaks a heavy thing in half so you can carry it, and it loosened the whole room a notch. "So here's the only thing I'll ask of you," she said. "All of you. The next time somebody walks through that door with a reason, a real one, a fake one, an exaggerated one, you usually can't tell which, and it usually isn't your business to maybe give them the bench. Give them the benefit you'd be praying somebody would give you on your worst day. The day after the bad phone call. The day the thing you're carrying is too heavy to put down even for an hour. You won't always be able to see what somebody's carrying. Most of the time, it's under a jacket. She reached up and pulled her own zipper the final inch to her throat. That's it. That's my whole speech. I've never given one before in my life, and I have absolutely no intention of ever giving another, so I'd appreciate it if at least one of you was actually listening. We were, every single one of us. I'd put my life on it. She trained the rest of the block with the jacket back on. And here's the strange truth of it. Once you knew, you could not watch her. Every rep, every set. One arm and a piece of scuffed carbon fiber keeping pace with men half her age and built like Briggs. Not for show. She never once did anything for show, just doing the work. Quiet. Steady. Exactly the way she'd done everything from the moment she walked in 2 minutes late and declined to apologize for it. The most remarkable person in the building, asking for nothing, drawing no attention, sweating through a gray jacket because attention was the one thing she'd spent 11 years learning to live without. Briggs ran the rest of that session like a man sleepwalking through a place he'd been certain he owned. But here's the thing. I kept coming back week after week, knees and all, and Briggs was not the same man. Something in him had genuinely shifted that Tuesday, and it held. It wasn't an act, and it wasn't temporary. He still clapped his hands, crack, still got loud when the room needed loud. He hadn't had a personality transplant, but when somebody came through that door limping, or holding their lower back, or with that particular scared, apologetic look that people get when they're convinced they don't belong and are just waiting to be told to leave, Briggs went easy. He'd pull them aside before the block started, have a quiet word, figure out what they could do instead of barking about what they couldn't. He started keeping a folding chair near the wall for people who needed to sit a set out, and he stopped treating that chair like a confession of weakness. One morning, maybe 2 months on, a young kid came in who had clearly never done a real workout in his life. Soft, pale, nervous, apologizing before he'd even reached the floor. Sorry. I don't really know what I'm doing, sorry. The old Briggs would have eaten him for breakfast and called it tough love. I watched the new Briggs walk over, put one big hand on the kid's shoulder and say, low enough that it was just between them, but I happened to be close enough to catch it. Hey, you showed up. That's the hard part, and you already did it. The rest is just reps. Stick with me. And I watched that kid stand up about 2 inches straighter. I don't know if Captain Holly's ever found out she did that. That she rewired a man just by refusing to make herself small in front of him. People like her almost never get to see the long tail of what they set in motion. They drop the stone and they're gone before the ripples reach the far bank. Because she did go. She kept coming for a couple of months. Then one Tuesday she just wasn't there, and she wasn't there the Tuesday after, and eventually somebody said she'd taken a new job and moved a few states over. No announcement. No goodbye block, no card, none of that. People like Captain Holly's don't really do goodbyes, I've come to think. They just zip the jacket up to the chin one last time and walk back out into the rain the same way they walked in. I think about that morning more than almost anything else from that whole strange stretch of my middle-aged life. More than I think about my own slow, creaking progress. More than the doctor who scared me into the building in the first place. Because I walked into that hall on that gray Tuesday genuinely believing that strength was the loudest thing in the room. The biggest arms. The sharpest clap. The man packing the line with his hands behind his back, deciding who was worth his time. And I walked out understanding that the strongest person in the building, by a distance that wasn't even close, was the one who had lost the most and asked for the least. The one who didn't want a parade or a pedestal or even a thank you. The one who, given the choice, would happily have let Briggs keep his little kingdom and his little speech, would have stood quietly in the back in her jacket and let him be wrong about her forever, If he'd only had the basic human decency to leave her be. She didn't take off that jacket to prove him wrong. She took it off because he refused to give her any other way out. And once it was off, she made him watch, rep by rep, exactly what he'd been mocking. You want to know the last image I carry from that day? When she zipped the jacket back up after those 50 push-ups, after the room had gone wild and then gone silent all over again, she happened to glance over to the side, to the edge of the room, to me, the nobody, the 46-year-old man half a beat behind every count, who'd done nothing that whole morning but stand there and watch. And she caught me staring. And she gave me one small nod, barely anything. The kind of nod that says, yeah, you saw it, you were paying attention, now you know. I've spent the years since then trying to live up to that nod. I'm not sure I've managed it, but I think about it every time I'm about to write somebody off. Every time I catch the look starting to form on my own face. So here's the one thing I'd leave you with, if you've stayed with me this whole way. Be very, very careful who you decide is weak. The quiet one in the corner, the one who came in late and didn't apologize, the one with the reason you've already decided is an excuse, the one wearing a heavy jacket on a warm day when it makes no sense at all. You have no idea, none, what's underneath it. And the day you find out, the day the jacket finally comes off and the room goes silent, you had better hope with everything you've got that you were kind before you knew.